Hello everyone, welcome to LAMP Lecture Series brought to you by LAMP AccuWellness Foundation Inc. This time featuring 5 SHU points. Each of the 12 regular meridians has below the elbow and the knee 5 specific points, namely Jing Well, Ying Spring, SHU Stream, Jing River, and He Sea, which are known as the 5 SHU points in general. The names of the 5 SHU points image the flow of meridian Qi as the flow of water. The Jing Well point is situated in the place where the meridian Qi starts to bubble. The Ying Spring point is where the meridian Qi starts to gush. The SHU Stream point is where the meridian Qi flourishes. The Jing River point is where the meridian Qi is pouring abundantly. Finally, the He Sea point signifies the confluence of rivers in the sea, where the meridian Qi is the most flourishing. The 5 SHU points have their own characteristics in the treatment of diseases. The Jing Well point is often used for loss of consciousness owing to its enlightening and awakening function. The Ying Spring point for heat diseases because it is able to clear and disperse the evil heat. The SHU Stream point for paroxysmal diseases or swelling and pain of joints. The Jing River point for asthma, cough, and throat disorders, and the He Sea point for enterogastric diseases. SHU means transporting. We can treat the entire body just with the 5 transporting points. There is a connection between the 5 transporting points, the body, and the environment. The sections of the channel between fingers or toes and elbows or knees is superficial and is most directly influenced by climate and external pathogenic factors. These points are related to the 5 elements as well. In order to illustrate the nature of the 5 transporting points, the Chinese compared the section of a channel between the fingers, toes, and elbows, knees to a river, starting from a well point at the tips of the fingers or toes, getting gradually larger and deeper, and ending in a sea point at the elbows or knees. Thus, from fingers, toes to elbows, knees, there is a progression in the size and depth of the channel. It is narrowest and most superficial at the fingertips and tips of the toes. These sections of the channels are more superficial than the rest, and this is one of the reasons for the importance of the points lying along its path. The energetic action of the point situated along this section of the channel is much more dynamic than other points, and this explains their frequent use in clinical practice. One could conceivably practice acupuncture using only these points. The other implication of the fact that the section of the channel between fingers, toes, and elbows, knees is more superficial is that this section represents the connection between the body and the environment. It is the section of the channel that is influenced most promptly and directly by climate and exterior pathogenic factors. For this reason, the points along this section of channel are more directly related to the seasons and can be used according to their cycle. For the same reason, the points along this section of channel are the points of entry of exterior pathogenic factors such as cold, dampness, and wind. At the fingertips and toes, the energy changes polarity from yin to yang or vice versa. Due to this change in polarity, the Qi of the channel is more unstable and therefore more easily influenced. This is a very old way of looking at meridians and points. It's an ancient perspective that compares meridian flow to the way that water flows in a stream. Once we understand the flow of Qi from this perspective, we then combine it with the 5 elements. This perspective is fun to know. It will serve you no matter where you roam in the world of meridians and points. Once again, these are not the SHU points. Those are a completely different set of points. This set is referred to as the 5 transporting SHU points, or the antique points. There are 5 of these points on every meridian. So, 5 points times 12 meridians gives us 60 points. We're going to explain all of these points to you, and then we're going to filter it down to the points that are most frequently used. Let's get a handle on the background of these 5 SHU points. Qi flows through the meridians, just as water flows through a riverbed. I think you've heard that a couple of times by now. Let's take this concept a little deeper. We have to realize that a river starts out really small, and then it gets bigger and bigger. Here again, we see the basis of classical Chinese medicine coming straight from nature. The more that you can go out to explore nature and contemplate these things, the richer your experience and knowledge of the meridians and points will be. So, we ask ourselves, where does a river begin? It begins at a little spring. Even the huge, massive Amazon River starts out in a really small place. I look it up on Google. It's an interesting thing to do, to look for the headwaters of rivers. It will help us understand where the ancients were coming from, since they were out there observing nature. So we have to go back out there and do the same thing. We can do that anytime. Even if we don't live near the Amazon, we have Google. A river begins at a spring. Then it bubbles up out of a spring, which is often called a well. I found this picture of a spring coming out of the Ozarks in the US. The water is emerging there out of the left, and it's just gurgling up out of the ground. Then it continues to get a little bit bigger. All that water is pouring out and eventually becoming a large river. We have to wonder where all of this water is headed. We have a big stream here, and it's headed toward the sea. Rivers and streams are always headed toward the sea. They just merge in with this massive body of water. Now we compare the flow of rivers to the flow of Qi. The 5 transporting points are all located from the tips of the fingers and toes back to the elbows and knees. This direction of flow may confuse some of us. Wait a minute, the yin meridians all flow upward and the yang meridians all flow downward. Yes, that's all true. A fascinating thing about Chinese medicine is that it is thousands and thousands of years old. So there are many different theories and many different ways of looking at things. So we're just going to suspend that prior information and look at things this way for now. Once you understand both theories, you can play around and see what works best for you. Each of the transporting points has a name that reflects the movement of water as it grows larger from a well to a stream all the way out to an ocean. The order is well, spring, stream, river, sea. The idea is that it's getting a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger until it eventually dumps into the ocean. Now, let's make sense of the name. Pinyin is the phonetic system used to transcribe the Chinese characters. The Chinese language is written with characters, not letters. The translation from the character into the Roman alphabet is called pinyin. We've been using pinyin throughout this class. For instance, Susan Lee is the name of stomach 36. Susan Lee is the pinyin spelling of the 3 characters that mean Susan Lee in the Chinese language. However, we are not going to get into all the details of translation. Jing means well. Ying means spring. SHU means stream. Jing here means river. He means sea. You will often see transporting points, names, written as Jingwell, Ying Spring, etc. because this shows the pinyin and the English translation. Chinese is a tonal language, so a different tone changes the meaning of a word. Even though we're spelling it Jing, when it is pronounced with different tones, it means completely different things. I can't really tell you which tone that is because it's not my area of expertise, but this is why you see Jingwell and Jing River. Let's get practical. The idea is that the qi is emerging at the tip of the thumb in this case. This is the Jingwell point. The meridian is getting a little bit bigger because the qi is gaining and gathering as it gets to the spring, just like a river. The water emerges from a well to a spring to a river, and it gets bigger as it goes. This third point is the shoestring point. As the pathway grows, we have the Ying River point. Then, finally, we end with the Hisi point. The Amazon River starts out very small and grows larger and larger before it merges back into the sea. These transporting points follow that same pattern. At the Hisi point, it is said that the qi dives deeply into the ocean of qi, basically into the whole body of qi. Each one of these points, because of their nature, whether it's a well, spring, stream, river, or sea, has a certain nature or flavor because of its location. On every meridian, all of these points are located between the tip of the fingers and the elbows, or between the tip of the toes and the knees. The exception is kidney 1, which is on the bottom of the foot. The transporting point theory is a way of describing the flow of qi emerging from those points, and the flow of qi getting larger and larger as it flows back into the ocean. This is just another way of envisioning the flow of qi in the meridians. Each of those points has a certain flavor. Jingwell points relieve a sense of fullness below the heart and the area of the lower ribs, like that hypochondriac point below the rib area. It doesn't matter which meridian we're talking about. If we're talking about a Jingwell point, which is a point on the tip of the finger, this is the character, action, or indication of that point. When there is a sense of stuffiness, fullness, or any issue going on in that area, use a Jingwell point. Ying spring points are used to clear heat in some form or another. We already learned a lot about clearing heat. We discussed taking the top off that boiling pot of water to let the extra steam out, which relieves excess heat. Keep in mind that heat could also be emotions like anxiety, anger, or when you are just really wound up. Heat is any kind of excess yang energy. Shoestring points are used to relieve heaviness, dampness, and joint pain. Dampness is one of those external influences that can get into the meridian system and clog things up. Anything that clogs up the meridians is going to create stagnation and pain in that area. Sometimes people have a tendency toward pain in their joints. Let's think about arthritis. Frequently with arthritis, people will say they know when it's damp out because the pain gets worse. Clearly, the ancient Chinese saw how the weather influenced us. Ying River points are used to help relieve respiratory conditions. When there are issues like a cough, difficulty breathing, or shortness of breath, turn to that set of Ying River points. Hisi points are used to soothe rebellious qi. We always love the term rebellious qi. Rebellious qi means that the qi is moving in the wrong direction. It's rebelling. For instance, if you drink a glass of water, then you want all of that water to go down to your stomach. If it rebels, then it comes back up in the form of vomiting. Rebellious qi refers to issues where the flow is going in the wrong direction. Coughing is also a form of rebellious qi because if you cough, the air is popping up when really it should be going down. These are examples of rebellious qi: burping, hiccups, cough, acid reflux, and vomiting. It's all the fun things that we love to talk about. Use the hissy points to help relieve those rebel qi issues. The second chapter of the Divine Pivot delves into much greater detail about the 5 transport points: well, spring, stream, river, and sea. It describes the nature and quality of channel flow at each of these points, their names, and most of their locations on each of the 12 main channels. There are differences between the points described in this chapter and those commonly used today. Most notably, the transport points for the heart channel described in the Inner Classic are the pericardium channel points in modern textbooks. Only in later centuries was the channel now associated with heart Shaoyin actually needled. Earlier traditions used the heart's envoy, the pericardium, as a substitute for treating the emperor, the heart, directly. A widely debated subject related to early descriptions of the 5 transport points involves the direction of flow in the channel system. Chapter 2 of the Divine Pivot describes the flow of qi along all of the channels as moving along the 5 transport points from the hands and feet inward toward the body. However, there are discrepancies elsewhere. For example, Chapter 10 of the Divine Pivot describes a circuit of channel flow moving up and down the appendages from the yin to the yang channels. Channel qi is said to move in a circuit from the lung to the large intestine, stomach, spleen, heart, small intestine, bladder, kidney, pericardium, triple burner, gallbladder, and liver. In other words, while the early chapters of the Divine Pivot describe the flow of channel qi from the extremities toward the body in all of the channels, later chapters seem to contradict this and instead describe the channel flow in a kind of closed circuit. This closed circuit flow moves outward from the trunk and then inward toward the heart and head as it travels from yin to yang paired channels. What can be made of this apparent conflict? One answer is that they actually represent 2 simultaneously occurring phenomena. The 5 transport point flow represents the gradual development of channel qi from its inception, where yin and yang meet in the extremities. The closed circuit flow, on the other hand, describes a circuit of nutrition. This is a difficult concept to grasp at first. It is helpful to consider that in the 5 transport point model, channel qi is growing in volume while moving deeper into the body along the path from the well points near the finger and toenails to the C points around the elbows and knees. At the same time, there is a circular flow of nutritive and source qi occurring along the pathways of the 12 channels. There is an almost multi-dimensional aspect to these 2 movements. On the one hand, the 5 transport point circuit represents the development of function along the channels from their roots in the fingers and toes toward their accumulation in the organs. On the other hand, as described in the section on the triple burner, there is a simultaneous movement of the nutritive protective aspect in the trunk and along the extremities that carries nutrition and prenatal stimulus to where it is needed. Both of these systems interact in the hands and feet. This is sometimes the hardest thing for students to understand. It has certainly been difficult to reconcile these two systems of circulation. At first, we were tempted to think of them as simply representing two different theoretical traditions. Certainly, some scholars have asserted just this. The problem, however, is that they both seem to be true at the same time. When one thinks about the conveyance of nutrition and source qi into the fluids of the body, as described in our understanding of the triple burner theory, it fits very well with a lot of classical concepts regarding channel qi as a closed circuit. On the other hand, there is still the very real clinical fact that points below the elbows and knees have quite profound effects when compared with other points on the body. In the end, we could conclude that in this case at least, the inner classic is not contradicting itself, but is describing two simultaneous physiological processes. Now, we have a question that will arise because of the use of the term function. We're talking here specifically about the development of the qi that drives and defines the individual organs. For example, as the lung channel progresses from lung 11 inward toward the C point, lung 5, there is a slow growth of channel qi. Channel qi is different from the circulation of the nutritive protective aspects and source qi that is simultaneously occurring in the triple burner. Channel qi is junctional, while the qi of the 12-channel circuit in the triple burner is nutritive. The development of channel qi involves those functions we memorize for the organs in Chinese medicine. The ability of the lung, for example, to be responsible for the skin and small hairs, or the ability of the heart to be responsible for the spirit, derives from this interesting concept of channel qi. This is where function begins. A metaphor might be helpful. Consider the workings of a large city like Beijing. The city requires roads and lines of communication to supply the multitude of activities engaged in by its population. There are systems for delivering all types of food, building supplies, and water through the various gates of the city, while other systems act to remove waste. In fact, the different gates in old Beijing were associated with particular products based on how the lines of supply converged. These supply systems may be likened to the closed-circuit flow of the 12 regular channels occurring within the larger environment of the triple burner. At the same time, within the city, there is a growth of human function. People consume the raw materials that come through the city's supply lines and transform them into refined, specific actions. A city has cooks, bankers, policemen, and factory workers, all drawing their nourishment from the circuits of supply and transport. This metaphor may not be perfect, but it might open a door to seeing how two movements of qi can occur at once. There is a circuit of nutrition and at the same time a gradual development of function along the course of the transport points. As long as the supply lines are open and coming through the city gates, people will be moving about doing their normal daily work. If, for example, a policeman doesn't show up to work on a particular day, you might suspect that his supply lines, carrying his salary and or food, have somehow been cut. In the body, normal organ function is dependent on both the circuit of general nutrition and the specific development of organ qi through the 5 transport points. Again, these points represent the process of developing function. They depend on the circuit of nutrition provided by the 12 regular channels for their material foundation. Of course, these points are part of those channels. but they represent another aspect of them that is occurring at the same time. Keep thinking about this and turning it over in your mind. You may not completely get it the first time you hear it. Chapter 2 of the Divine Pivot describes the distal limbs as the roots of the channels. Like roots in the plant kingdom, these channel roots absorb what is specifically needed by their associated organs. Actually, the image of a root system might be more appropriate if one keeps in mind that the channels continue to absorb all along their courses as they move through the 5 transport points toward the elbows and knees. From their inception at the well points where yin and yang meet in a flash of qi creation, the channels develop form and heft. As they grow in volume, they selectively take in information from the rest of the body and from the surrounding environment. This occurs at a particularly brisk rate in the multitude of interactions that take place around the stream points, also source points on the yin channels. The process continues as the flow in the channels moves proximally. In addition to information, the channels are also developing a strong flow of qi, which eventually becomes the qi of the organs themselves. Returning to the less philosophical realm of the clinic, one should keep in mind that the best use of the distal points takes into account the physiological process of channel qi development, as described in the 5 transport point theory. Because channel qi is developing and deepening along the forearms and lower legs, the stimulation of these points can initiate change in the qi dynamic of the organs. Different changes will occur from stimulating different points. When crafting treatment strategies, one must therefore consider the movement and development of channel qi at each of the transport points. With that in mind, the traditional categories of well, spring, stream, river, and sea are the best place to start. Thank you very much for your attention and hope to see you in our next video.